Hey everybody, welcome. Welcome to the session entitled, How Do You Motivate Partners? My name is Rachel Tuller and I'm glad to be your moderator here today. And I'm joined with two fantastic channel chiefs on the line today. Super excited to have Lori and Craig with us, both who have more than a couple decades of experience in the industry. So I don't want to do a countdown and add it all up. It would be a lot between the three of us, I think.
Fair enough.
And if you were the last session, you just saw Craig. He's back with us again, joining us from Aryaka. Craig has been the senior vice president there for a while. He's got a track record of building successful global sales and marketing organizations around the industry. And last year won the award of one of the channel influencers of the year. So super excited to have you with us today, Craig.
Yeah, excited to be here. Hello, everybody. Excited about this topic. It resonates very well for me because we live this every single day. So can't wait for the conversation.
Excellent, excellent. And Lori, excited to see your face, one of my favorites. Lori's been a channel chief, a strong sales leader for a really long time in this industry, a fabulous advocate for women in business and women in IT. Super excited to have you here today. And I love the way that you help advance women in industry.
Thank you so much. I like Craig, am excited about this topic because post leaving Juniper Networks, I have been sitting in the underdog seat for, over 15 years of my career. So I love that and would love to share anything that could help people along this journey.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had this conversation in Nashville. There was a channel executive council there, and it was actually called, How Do You Motivate Partners If You Are Not One of Their Top 3 Vendors? And so that's the approach that we're going to take today. One of the underdogs, one of the little guys, you're not Cisco, Microsoft, or AWS. How do you get the mind share and attention of your partners? So let's go ahead and dig in. I kind of want to break the session into 3 kind of sections. And everybody on the line, I want you to jump in and ask questions. As you can see, we've got just the 3 of us here today, so there'll be lots of time to go through Q&A and dig deep on a couple of things. But we want to kind of frame the problem, right? Understand, what is the challenge with being a small or an underdog partner in this world, one of the vendors. Talk about what we think partners want, what we know partners want based on our experience, and then get into some of the solutions. And in our preparation calls, I was lucky enough to hear what some of the things that Craig and Lori are putting into practice. And I think there's some great ideas. So get your pen and paper ready. You're going to want to take some notes. All right, let's just start with, what is the problem? What are the biggest challenges that you have if you are the underdog? And Lori, we'll start with you.
Yeah, the biggest problem is, getting mind share, getting them to call you back, getting them to think about your solution and the customers that they're selling with. The problem is, pretty simple in that they have hundreds and hundreds of vendors at times to kind of deal with. So, why you? Why pick you? How do you stay top of mind and relevant for them?
Excellent. Craig?
Yeah, she kind of nailed it there. It's getting their attention, right? The channel is a very, very crowded space, right? And so if you're a successful partner, well, guess what? Everyone wants to work with you. So everybody's calling you every single day, telling you how great their products and services are. So as an underdog, it's difficult to get their attention. And by the way, I've lived on both sides of that equation. I came from Lumen where, I spent 18 years and we didn't have that same problem. So we're a big brand, well-known. And now I'm on the other side of that equation at Aryaka where we're a $100 million company and we're trying to get everybody's attention. So, above and beyond just getting their attention, one thing that us as smaller providers are faced with is a resourcing gap, right? In terms of the money that we can provide to the partners and also the size and the scope of the resources that we can offer. And so I think it's a combination of those 3 things that, we have to solve for as being a little guy and gal.
Yeah, definitely agree. Money is definitely the issue. And this is where we start to get scrappy.
Exactly.
All right. So what do you think partners are looking for? I know we've had a couple of sessions on this so far in the event. We actually heard from partners first thing this morning, and they told us what they're looking for. A couple of the notes that I took from that were they want us to be consistent. It doesn't matter what we say, they just want us to be consistent with that. Whether it's, we're going to do things a certain way, they want us to act with integrity because they do, they're representing us to the customers. And one of them said automation, make it easy for us, low barrier to entry. So talk to us a little bit about how you've addressed some of those items. Automation, how do you view that? If you're the little guy, do you have the big PRMs and all the TCMA systems and the full stack to go with it? Or do you kind of cobble things together? And what's the best way to go about that?
Yeah, I would say, and maybe Craig, I'll start, which is, it again depends on where you are in the journey and the money and the resources that you have. I certainly have come into situations where I don't have a lot of money, I don't have a lot of people. How am I going to make myself look bigger? How am I still going to show up? So it meant that I was doing videos with my phone. Hi, partners, something exciting to say to you. Every week kind of coming up with something that would be new and interesting for them. Also doing the enablement training. Sometimes there's not a full-blown enablement piece or a partner portal to kind of put those on, but you've got to be able to kind of get a video or, link them to an asset that's really interesting, or sharing, case studies and wins and those kinds of things. But, certainly as you grow, having automation is really important. Having a partner portal where information is stored, but as you're building that and building the business case to actually have that in place, to your point, you've got to be scrappy, and sometimes you got to pull out your old iPhone and do a video, right?
I love that. And I love getting videos.
Yeah. And then
when I was a partner.
Yeah, just to give my perspective too, to jump in, and great answer, by the way, Lori. Looking at it from my perspective, just to maybe break it down more foundational kind of elements, like in terms of what partners really are looking for. I mean, to me, it's always four main things, right? Number one, they want to have value, right? They want to have value in the partnership. And there's a lot of detail around that, but as a scrappy underdog, you've got to separate yourself from the bigger providers out there. And how can you create value? Well, I think ultimately you got to look for ways for partners to grow their business. And there's many things you can do in terms of demand gen programs, things like that I think we will hit on here later. So I think it's value. And the second thing is trust, right? They want to feel confident if they bring their trusted relationships to you, that you're going to make it look good, right? You're going to honor that relationship. You're going to protect them, and you're going to make them, feel secure, right? And so there's foundational elements there that you can do with your program in terms of the way you structure your deal registration or your rules of engagement, right? That can offer partners those levels of protection. We could talk more about that here too. And I think the third thing is service, right? At the end of the day, they want to make sure the service being provided to their customers is superior, right? At the end of the day, that's what it's about. They want to solve their customer's use case, and they want to do it in a good manner, right? They want that customer to be happy. And then lastly is support, right? At the end of the day, they want to feel supported in terms of when there's a problem, there's someone that's going to pick up the phone. And I always believe, I have my whole career, that's where relationships are really formed, right? And in a stressful situation, when something's not going right, if you pick up the phone, you have that conversation and you own it, and you support that partner, guess what? You're going to have that relationship for life. And so when I look at those things that are important, I kind of look at those four components.
Yeah. I love that, Craig. I think you absolutely hit, some really key things there. One of the things that I see a lot of times that vendors do that partners always give feedback is, listen, whatever you put in place, just give us time to implement it before you come up with the next thing, right? So give it some time. Let us kind of like test it out before you're changing things too much, right? You're coming at me with too many things. So I love that about support. That's what 100% right. They're not going to introduce their most trusted customers to a company, to a vendor that they don't trust, that the customer will not have a great experience. So the more that we share some of those stories and those wins and those, those key things, I think is really important as well. Yeah. Well said.
Yeah. And just to add a little bit more too, there's a couple comments in the chat we can hit on here too, but I always look at what are the competitors doing? Like, what are the competitors doing in the market that's creating friction? It's creating problems for the partners, right? and then do the opposite of that, right? You don't want to follow those negative trends. Like, you want to do things that create the trust and relationship within your partner community. So, some of the practical things you can do, right, in terms of deal registration, make sure you offer some level of protection. And I look at the way that we do it in terms of how do we offer that protection at scale is we protect opportunities at a certain stage. And so, number one, we mandate partners put their deals through a deal registration process. And for a certain period of time, that opportunity is open for many partners to pursue it. When it becomes point of a technical validation or proof of concept, at that point, we protect the opportunity, because we believe at that point, the partner is very well positioned. So you think about, how do you offer that trust? How do you offer that protection? That's one example of how you can do things at scale within a deal registration policy.
Yeah. And in the chat, Rachel, Jennifer says, it might be good to hear thoughts on how you do that at scale, right? If you're a vendor that has 100 partners, it's much different than being a vendor with 10,000. So absolutely right. So when I was at scale at Juniper Networks, right, I left the company and they were, $3 billion, $5 billion company, with thousands and thousands of partners. This is where the marketing element, I feel, becomes so much more important. This is where demand gen becomes so important. This is where, marketing segmentation, like, what do we need for this mid-market versus the higher end enterprise, and the partners serving those are going to be different and want to hear different messages. This is where, you have a lot of marketing campaigns that become door openers, where there's a constant drip, where you're looking at programs where you might have inside sales, people that are going after things, and you're looking at things much differently. But there's a bigger drum beat and a much more segmented drum beat that I think is required when you're touching that amount of partners, if that's helpful.
Yeah, I think that's so true.
Yeah, it just offers some thoughts from my perspective. And I agree with that too. I mean, one way you can look at it too is your segmentation strategy, right? Looking at ways to segment the partners in varying stages. And I think this sort of applies whether you have a program with 1,000 partners or 10,000 partners. This is a strategy every single person can execute on. And that's understanding where the partner is in the journey of working with you as the provider. And so what we've done over here is we've segmented partners in 1 of 5 stages, right? So stage 1, dormant, no relationship. Stage 2, they're starting the journey of working with us, whether that's they've attended a webinar, they've done some step forward in the relationship. Step 3, they've gone through a level of certification and onboarding. Step 4 is they've actually started the deal registration phase, right? And this is where it gets exciting. This is what we all want. We want partners active and engaged in sending us opportunities. And then stage 5, well, that's all about the partners that are actively selling. And so once you have the partners segmented in that stage, to Lori's point, well, guess what? You can start to be very specific and strategic and focused around setting the right messaging, the right opportunities, the right engagement at those partners. Your goal is always the same thing, right? You want to move them along the journey of working with you to the point they become active.
Yeah, I think that's great. And that's a great segue into some of the other questions that we have here around spiffs and incentives. And I'm actually going to tie those together with Ellen's question around that first call and stories about, when a partner first picked up the phone, when you called them, right? We start at the executive level. And, we heard from the panelists this morning, don't invite the CEO to all the meetings. But you know what? He's probably got to be in, or she probably has to be in the first one anyways, to get on board and get them to sign up with you as a partner. So then where do you go from there, and how do you earn that trust? How do you build that relationship inside the organization? I'm sure spiffs have a lot to do with it. We'll talk about that when we get to actual tactics in a minute. But as you're developing the relationship, any stories come to mind about when you first onboarded a partner?
Oh yeah, so many. But here's one of the things I'll tell you. And again, a view from being scrappier and smaller, not necessarily larger. Because you're right, when you're larger, you're going to the CEO, our CEO and their CEO are having a conversation. Then they get together and then it kind of rolls top down, right? Then you get the notes and you got to figure out how to go activate that. When you're scrappier, sometimes what ends up coming to you is the reality that says, you've got to get to somebody that you know within the company that can help advocate it. Sometimes it's a sales leader. Sometimes it's a technical leader within the company. And sometimes it's a salesperson that bumped into an opportunity with the company and it was like the first time that they had reached out to you. That happens quite a bit. Like, listen, we ran into you guys, I'm now doing a bid, that kind of thing. So how do you now take advantage of that opportunity with more, right? So there's different ways that you kind of do that. Sometimes, as I'm, going into a new company, I will reach out to the head of sales or some of the sellers that I know. And I say, listen, this is a great opportunity. You're missing out, like making them feeling like they're missing out on something. And let me let you know, you're going to make more money with us than your competitor. Let me give you an example of that. A lot of them are paid on gross margin. You're going to make guaranteed gross margin of 30%. And here's what ends up happening when it comes to the renewal. And here's all the things that you can add on. And then their head just starts to get really, okay, well, this sounds interesting. How do I start to get engaged? And then I use that sales relationship or that engineering relationship to then create the momentum, right? They're starting to kind of see some demand. So that's just one example, one story. I'm sure Craig has many to add to that too.
Yeah, and I think it all goes back to that value statement I kind of opened up with, right? I mean, a lot of partners, they're looking for the same thing. Again, it's crowded. Everybody's telling them how great their products and services are, but it's the providers that reach out with an opportunity to drive value back, right? And a lot of times that's how we create the engagement initially. And what I found is typically when we have conversation, almost every single time we come to an opportunity, right? And so you just got to figure out a way to be scrappy to have that first conversation, because most often that will lead to some sort of opportunity you can work on together. And the way we do that is we target specific strategic partners that we believe are a good fit for us. And then we're proactive in opening up dialogue with those partners through a number of different outreach campaigns. But when we do that, we come to them with value. Here's what we can do for you. Here's how we can offer value for you. Here's certain examples. I know we'll go into that later when we get to the practical side, but that's how you stand out. Like, you got to come to them with something that'll help them.
Yeah. And I would just add, Craig, you brought to my mind with that wonderful answer. One of the things that I would always kind of consider with some of the target partners is a fast track program. Yeah. For the first 90 days, we're going to give you incremental, discount or margin on your deals. And for the engineering team, if you just help us find a deal, get us that first meeting, we're going to pay you, $1,000, $500, whatever it is. But you have a fast track program that creates some urgency, that's measured, that's monitored, that rewards them for the value that they're bringing, and the sales cycle, kind of the journey of the sales cycle is how I always like to look at it. But that could be another kind of creative way, just kind of talking about incentives, which I know we're going to get into. There's some questions on that, but that's just one way to kind of fast track, do a fast track program, not with everybody, but maybe your target partners, you're launching a new product, you're getting into a new market. That's a good way to kind of get them really activated behind your solution.
Yeah, I love that. We actually heard about Fast Track probably at one of these events a few years ago, and we implemented it, and it was fantastic. It was about getting, even things like technology certified and getting the folks involved. I think probably a story that I have around building community was one area to kind of get into partners, right? Remember the user group days, right? Where customers and partners, everybody would show up at a, bar or restaurant somewhere and just talking about a given technology. Veeam was the master at this. They were a small company who attached themselves to VMware's customer base. They did backup only for virtual at the time. And they mobilized a community of evangelists, right? They said, let's let people know about our technology. Let's get them get their hands dirty, get people talking about it. And it got really buzzy and exciting. Eventually, when I came in, we formalized that program, called them the Veeam Vanguards, gave them leather jackets and all that stuff. But these are third-party people that are out out there singing your praises with both partners and customers, and leveraging the community that you're tangential to, I think is another great opportunity to do that when you're trying to be small, scrappy, and don't really have the funds to go really dig into partners.
Yeah, love that. Natalie says in the chat that, she liked the conversation around segmentation, but that's another way to do that. You're spot on, Natalie, that says that when you have segmentation in your partner program, right? And you have 3 levels in the program as an example, another way to motivate them is just to fast track them into the higher level. Give them an opportunity to then, go and earn that. But you've got, again, based on time frames, but a lot of those things can be really motivating too, because it gives them an advantage to play at a different level that they're not coming into, and they have the right to compete. So that's always a good one too, Natalie. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, and just to give a couple examples from my side too, and our service is very complex, very, very complex. And so typically, like we find opportunities through the hearts and the minds of the engineering community, right? And so what engineers love, they love the educational aspect, right? They love to become better at their craft. They love to become smarter, more informed. And so one of the campaigns we ran recently was an educational opportunity, for partners on the engineering side could become certified. And so if they took the time and they had the dedication to go through our certification process, it's not extremely overbearing, but if they took the time, well, guess what? We gave them the opportunity of winning a pair of Jordans, and these are like Aryaka colored Jordans. They're awesome, by the way. I have a pair, and I get comments on them all the time. And so, who doesn't want a pair of Jordans? And so, we ran that campaign, and we had tremendous engagement from the engineering community of people that went through the certification process, and then the ones that were drawn, it was an opportunity to win through a drawing. We sent them out a pair of Jordans. We said, do me a favor, please put these on and tag us back in a photo. And there's an example of how you create noise, right, online against some of the bigger competitors out there. That campaign was run, I think, 1.5 years ago or so, and I still get comments all the time about those Jordans.
Well, I would have to weigh in on that campaign because I wouldn't want Jordans, but any red bottom, anything I'll take.
Well, there's a pair of Jordans that are red and white.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Now you got me.
Yeah.
But Lori, in our pre-call, you did have some really great incentives. And going to the previous question around spiffs and incentives, you had some low cost, no cost incentives. You had some different points in the partner journey that you place incentives, right? Not always just at closing a deal, but along the sales cycle. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So, we're always looking for ways to stand out. Again, I'm a $100 million company competing against everybody for mind share. And so we always find ways to stand out by doing things that are unique. And so I told you about the Jordans. It was one thing we've done. Another thing we did is when we were coming back to market, and this was kind of a relaunch of our program, Aryaka had lost a lot of the relationships in the market, was we felt we had to come out, we had to be aggressive, we had to almost do this barnstorming campaign. And so we went on a mission of creating as much noise as we possibly could online. And then we created a series of events around the US. And so we gave partners, and again, we were targeted. We said, these are the ones we want to meet with in these markets. And so we sent them invitations to come to a racetrack to drive super high-end cars, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Porsche, things along those lines, and come out, meet the Aryaka sales team, drive the cars, have an unbelievable experience, and just spend a few minutes to learn more about Aryaka. And guess what? I can tell you, it was not hard to get those partners to accept those invitations, because who does not want to drive a Ferrari or Lamborghini around a racetrack? And so, we looked at our relaunch and we executed on, I think, 12 of those throughout the course of a year. And we had tremendous engagement. Obviously, that does cost a little bit of money, but the return was tremendous. And we've tied those campaigns back to some very, very large wins we've had here. And that's just one example of how we stood out and got engagement with partners that were not taking our phone calls.
Great. Lori, I know you've got some stories too.
Yeah. Again, I would say when you're larger at scale, rebates are always great, right? It motivates the company. and it has them focused on the right set of things. You're launching a new product line. You want to increase business on the security product. You can create rebates that drive behavior from the top down. A lot of people will say, well, then you're missing kind of the individual. But if you get the right sort of rebate in place, and you get the right sort of, top-down approach, those can be really great for larger vendors when they're thinking about their go-to-market. When you're in the smaller space, as Craig mentioned, motivating the technical teams, motivating the sales teams are important. I find that the technical teams, like Craig, just mentioned, often need to validate the solution first, like having their endorsement first before going to sellers is super important. So getting the engineers to kind of validate it. And by the way, they often feel left out of spiffs and incentives, the engineers. If you talk to them, right, just ask would be my recommendation, but they often feel left out. So, or they have to split it with their seller, and sometimes their seller is not always being fair, whatever it is. So you kind of have to talk to each of the resellers about it. I would suggest that incentives, view them as menu items that you can leverage depending on the reseller you're engaging, the type of partner, the industry that you are engaging, in other words, where you are on the journey. I'm doing a fast start because I'm just trying to get people to take the first call and find the first deal, versus I've been at this for a couple of years. I've been at this for, so there's some different levels. BDR campaigns could be another one where we just put our BDR team dedicated to a partner where they were doing, cold calls on their behalf. Lots of different menu items that you can use depending on where you are on the journey, what you're trying to motivate, and how it ties to the metrics for the company, right? Because that's the last thing you want to do, is put something in place that you're going to have to now defend, but it doesn't align to the company objectives, right? So you've got to make sure that that's tying out, and you're able to report on it, measure it, all those kinds of things.
Yeah, for sure. One of the comments here is that many companies don't allow us to incent individuals. And that's specifically true in EMEA and some other markets. There are companies, public sector, there's rules around that. So some of the ways we've gotten around them are to be able to go to the company themselves. But if you're doing, like a pizza party, I mean, obviously the company can't eat a pizza. It's going to be the people at the company eating the pizza. So find those ways where the company almost has to disperse that amongst their team, give them stuff to give away to their teams, et cetera, even if you can't reach them directly. Lori, you had a great idea how you would, create videos of wins and showcase, different individuals at partners and create buzz around it. I thought that was a great idea. Who does, we know when it comes to the technical folks, they love all the certifications after their name. They also love being promoted for the solutions that they're building. So I thought that was a great idea.
Yeah. The other thing I'll just kind of say on that is, when companies don't allow you to do spiffs and things like that, you're right. You've got to get creative. So, an idea would be, listen, if you guys get to this revenue, or you guys close these deals that we've identified, we'll host your Christmas party, or, just like you said, different ways to kind of do that. You just have to ask them, right? If spiffs are not allowed, tell me what would work. Tell me what would be valuable for your team. And they usually have the best answers, by the way. Yeah.
And I think the way to go about it is to drive the value back, right? If they can't take spiffs, well, what else interests them? Demand gen, right? So you create campaigns that become a benefit to them around demand gen. So, Lori touched on it. One thing we've done here is we created a program called Throttle. And so what Throttle is here at Aryaka is we've done all the analytics around what customers are a good fit. And we also understand customers that have a high intention of buying our services. And so then we create campaigns with our BDR community, like Lori referenced, where I have 365 days of content and cadence built with our BDR teams to create outreach into those good fit, high intent customers. And so when you find a customer that says, yes, I'm interested, I want to have a conversation, well, guess what? Here comes the value part. You take that And that gets pushed back out to the partner community as the value. You know, you get them new opportunities and engagement they didn't have before. And the beauty of that is, guess what? Now you can tie that back to the partners in their particular stages. And that becomes a benefit of working with us. If you become a stage 4 partner, stage 5 partner, we're going to help you even further. We're going to drive demand gen back to you. Yeah. And so this is a program we've been running here about a year, and it's global in nature. We have partners all over the world participating in it, but we're very strategic in who we offer those services to, because we don't have enough resource. We don't have enough BDRs, right, to support the entire community, but we're very specific. And guess what? The partners that have shown interest, they love it, and it's very, very successful. And that'll get around the whole spiff thing, right?
Great. Well, between throttle and race cars, I see a trend here going, Craig. Are you in the automotive sector by any chance? One of the things we talked about in our pre-call was around distribution, right? How do you leverage distribution when you're the little guy? So let's talk about that a little bit. I know we did that extensively. It was a program that I brought in at Cloudera, to try and get some mind share. So I can talk about that in a minute. But Lori, I know you had some experiences around that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, big or small, shout out to our distributors because they certainly have played a role, especially when I am coming in to build a brand. I'm coming in to recruit new partners. I'm coming in to cover new markets that we haven't covered before. They have played a big role in and really helping us do that partner recruitment, kind of, like I said, kind of build our brand, and certainly internationally kind of help us expand and walk us through those things. So it's always been a huge lever. Every company that I've gone to and partnered with, and they've always played a very successful role in our success, and partners really appreciate that they can do a lot of the enablement pieces and the onboarding pieces. Because we didn't have a fancy portal, we didn't have a fancy tool, they're able to, again, make us look a little bit bigger than we actually are.
Yeah, and same over here, by the way. So, same challenge for us is we can't be all places, right? And so we have to look at strategies on how we can expand to create coverage models, right? And so we're getting ready to open up Madrid. Madrid is going to be a new market that we open up here in the month of May. And the way we're going to do that is through a distributor model. And so we've selected a distributor that's going to handle Spain, it's going to handle Portugal, and then we're going to help them by, again, going back to that BDR conversation. We're going to help them start to recruit other firms to work underneath them to cover that particular model. And so I think there's ways you can be creative there, again, to look bigger than you are by leveraging this particular model. You just have to be very specific and strategic about it. Like, especially in my case, I don't have a tremendous amount of resource. So the ones that we select, they have to be spot on. Like, we have to know that we're going to get some level of return, because I can only support a few of those globally.
That's true. We picked one global that covered most markets, like a broadline distributor, as you would call them, right? That could really help us in many markets. And then some of the other markets, we picked smaller, more targeted, regionally based distributors to help us. But one thing they all had in common that I found very helpful, not just their portal and everything, as you mentioned, but they had a lot of tools that they're used to onboarding new vendors, right? So they've got the enablement frameworks. They've got an ideal partner profile. They walked us through and got us starting to think about what are the adjacencies, who's selling other products. Like, we were a data platform. Who are the different ISVs that we were already working with that maybe these partners were working with, that an adjacency or a solution with us, would be super helpful. And then their tech teams came in and started creating some of these solutions and inserting our name in the place of some other data platforms to say, hey, this Mr. Partner, Ms. Partner, you're already working with X. You should now consider this company. And they did a great job of positioning us when we didn't even know how to position ourselves in some of those markets. So I thought it was really super helpful. One more thing that we got into was, distribution kind of leads to a conversation in my mind around marketplaces because of the convergence. So how are you leveraging marketplaces to also make yourself look bigger or, develop those cloud, or both of you SaaS businesses? Do you have, cloud relationships? Talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for years and years, we didn't know if they were friend or foe. And I think depending on which reseller you ask, that could be a different question. But here's what I will say. Our customers are buying from marketplaces, which means we have to be engaged in marketplaces. Like we just, there's no choice to it. Now, to the extent you play in marketplace and how you leverage it is a different, and which one you leverage is a conversation that you have to kind of make on that. At the last company I was with, Deepwatch, we leveraged the AWS marketplace, and we did, fairly well with getting embedded in that. We ended up building pipeline, partner source pipeline coming from AWS. And again, because we started with the technical teams identifying the solution of where we were fitting into security and how that conversation played out. But, it does take time. It does take dollars to invest, like make no mistake. But it could have a really good return if you kind of stay after it. And so it's one of those things that it's a company decision that takes time to build, that takes investment to build, may not have really quick returns on it, but definitely when it does, it's the gift that keeps on coming for sure.
That's great. Craig, I'm going to actually pivot and have you answer Natalie's last question here in the sake of time. So not just what is your biggest barrier to gaining additional resources? I think we all face those barriers, but how do you overcome that? And how did you go to your CFO and say, I need money for this?
Yeah. Well, this is my biggest piece of advice for everybody out there is like, you've got to understand your numbers, right? So, step one, when you come into organization is you've got to understand the history. So go back and understand the investments that have been made prior to you. And then you've got to track that back and try to depict the actual return on investment the company achieved through those particular investments. And so, what we do here is every single quarter we close out, we look at the money we spent in the various campaigns and we track it back to a cost per lead. I know exactly what it cost for every campaign that I'm running, and I know the return that I'm going to achieve out of those particular campaigns. And so you've got to track that. And so then when you get to the point of asking for investment dollars, well, guess what? You've got the data. And so all these decisions are very much data driven because you've got the facts, you've got the history, and the return. I know if I put $1 in this particular campaign, it's going to generate this much demand gen, which is going to turn into this much sales. And so at the end of the day, you've got to understand those numbers inside and out, because once you have that, it's very much a data driven decision by the CFO. And, they're willing to make those investments if they can tie it back to a return.
That's so true. And Lori, maybe part two of Natalie's question is that a program investment or a headcount investment? How do you discern between the two? How do you know when you need to throw more bodies at something or you need a scalable programmatic approach?
Yeah, I think there's kind of two parts to this. I've had the privilege of being owned by private equity. And what that means is, they want their return on investment fast and like yesterday. So what I quickly learned in my dialogue with my CFO, with my CEO, and with the private equity board is they're always looking for trade-offs. So sometimes, here's the hard conversation, right, is I need to reduce the number of resellers in my ecosystem that are not performing, because now I can take that money that we were going to use there, and now I can fund something else I want to do, an incentive. So to the CFO, it's like, oh, you're saving me money. You're getting rid of, some resellers that are non-performing. That's also good because they want to hear that you're being compliant with that. And you're now going to take the money and put it into this spiff, but you've got to be able to show the business case. Here's the best case scenario I'm seeing with this spiff. Here's the most likely, right? And here's the worst case scenario. So they have 3 examples of what that spiff could look like in terms of payout. Same thing happens when you're talking about a headcount. Usually we're funded out of the sales headcount, right? And so it's a trade-off. Again, right? We're going to put a resource in place here, but we're giving up, something here. So it has to be, trade-offs that you have, or we're going to delay this incentive so that we can get a person in place for, those things. So it's, I always kind of view it as I'm operating within the same envelope of money, because I've never had the advantage of always having more. Sometimes that happens. But if you operate within that and you always sort of view it as a trade-off, here's what I'm willing to give, here's what we're going to get, and here's the examples that I can show you in terms of best case, most likely, worst case, so that they have an idea of how that's going to impact, the budget and revenue.
That's so true. And we are at time. In fact, we're over time. So Jennifer, we're not going to get to your question, but a real quick answer would be what Lori just said: help your channel chief build that case from the program side of it and have that person run it up the flagpole for you, because they definitely know the numbers and they have to do that. I want to thank you both for joining us today. I think it's been fantastic. Great session, lots of great engagement. And I want to remind everybody else to finish the post-event survey. And if you haven't done the virtual quest yet, it's actually super fun. Go do that and earn some points. Lori, Craig, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Great
everybody.
to see you all.
Bye.
Bye.